Good afternoon. My name is Eric Linder. I head up the technical sales team for Armis. We are a US-based company with presence here in Montreal as well as Toronto. We'll talk a little bit today about reducing attack surface area, as well as some of the things that I see in a day-to-day basis with the customers that I'm engaged with. So when you take a look at where we are today from a perspective of devices in the environment, I think this chart really covers it very well. And so what it may be hard to see out there in the back, right, that sort of that line, and the colors are a little bit difficult to see, but however, if you look at the companies that are here today, the majority of them are focused on these devices that are underneath the line. Your laptops, your servers, devices that Linux boxes, Windows boxes, devices in Azure or Google, those devices that you typically can put some sort of agent on, right? Those are fairly easy to be able to understand and be able to inventory where they are. Where this gets complicated, if you think back to what BYOD was, how do I handle Android phones? How do I handle iPhones? How do I handle all of these tablets that are coming into my environment, and what are they doing? And as you look at that, right, that's still a relatively small percentage of what we're dealing with. And so if you take a look at where 2025 is heading, over 50 billion connected devices, how am I going to manage all of those connected devices when most of them are unmanaged? And when I say unmanaged, they don't have an agent on them. Some devices that fall into that, medical devices, your infusion pump can't have an agent on them. Your program logic controller in an operating technology environment can't have an agent on them. So how do I go through that process of managing what those devices are and be able to not only secure them, but ultimately minimize my attack surface that I have to take care of? Compound the fact that there is no perimeter. I mean, how many people work from home these days, right? What used to be a lot easier just 3 or 4 years ago is very challenging when most of an organization's workforce is remote. So now I've lost the protection of my firewalls, my proxies, and everything else that's associated with it. And it's getting out of control, right? Add on top of it, there's probably 10 to 20 vendors in here that most organizations are going to bring in. Whether it's an Okta, a SentinelOne, Azure, Google, right? You start to put all of these devices in all of these different tools, that ability to manage your inventory becomes exceptionally challenging. Now, add the divide of IT versus OT. The IT people can't see the OT environment. The OT people can't see the IT environment, or vice versa. They don't understand how it operates. It only further adds to the complexity. And so when you look at what we've historically done with OT environments, we kept them air-gapped. They were intentionally kept away from IT environments to minimize the risk associated with IT and OT. Well, that's great, but as a field technician who's been sent to the middle of nowhere, Topeka, Kansas, to reset a box that took me 12 hours of travel time, that's no longer efficient. How do we do that? How do we put that device online so that we can immediately get it back up and operational, right, without losing downtime? And so now with the evaporation of that, sort of that line, right, all these devices that are no longer air-gapped are now susceptible. So if you take a look, and this is just over really the last 10 years, most of these are some of the biggest disruptive hacks that you've seen, whether it's Stuxnet, Black Energy, WannaCry, Havix, Triton, all of them targeted operating technology devices. And why? Because they are suddenly valuable and they're suddenly connected. So again, getting back to this idea of how do I protect these devices if I don't know about them? I need to be able to pull them into a centralized repository. I need to understand what they're doing. I need to understand the vulnerabilities associated with it, right? I can tell you every single day that I log into a new customer environment, I want to say I'm shocked, but I have found NT40 servers. How many people think there's still NT40 servers running around in the world? They're out there, right? And they're running critical applications, believe it or not, right? So if I don't know about it, right, or the person who knew about that device retired 2 years ago and nobody realized that it still exists. Does the company not have an exposure? They ultimately do, right? So giving that visibility into those devices and what's running on those devices is critically important, right? One of the things I talk about is, with better data comes better decisions, and ultimately, right, if I'm protecting an operating technology, whether it's a power plant, a wastewater treatment center, whatever it is, a widget that you're producing, I need to ensure that it is secure, and I need to understand the vulnerabilities and gaps that exist inside of it. So again, you're talking a little bit about why has that transformed, right? Well, just like the digital transformation of IT in year 2020 during the pandemic, right? Everyone moved to the cloud. We moved to applications at record speed. Security sometimes got left behind. Well, guess what? We did the same exact thing in the OT space, right? Again, I can't necessarily put a technician out in the middle of nowhere to get something done. So what did I do? I tore down those air-gapped environments. I gave them a mechanism to be able to remote into a system to be able to turn it back online. And why? Because it's profit, right? The sooner I get a device back online, right, it's either servicing someone, right, or it's producing a widget. And I can't tell you how many times people say, well, yeah, that's a $1 million an hour machine, right? If it's down, right, we know the cost associated with it. I had a life sciences customer who just told me the story the other day. Someone brought their Windows laptop home, which they weren't supposed to do. It got infected. They brought it back into the manufacturing center. They plugged it in. Their Rockwell Programming Studio Logic 5000 connected to the robot, corrupted the robot. It was down for 6 weeks. So just do the math there. That's a lot of downtime for a robot, right? And it literally stopped one of their production lines for 6 weeks, all because a laptop crossed over an imaginary boundary that they didn't think about. So again, understanding that convergence zone between your IT devices and your OT devices is critical, right? The more I understand, I can make those better decisions. I can segment, right? So one of the things that we often come out of a lot of these conversations, inventory is one piece of it, but inventory leads to those segmentation, whether it be micro-segmentation, macro-segmentation, right, in your environment. And again, right, it allows businesses to derive more value out of their different technologies, right? How do I optimize my production lines? How do I use big data to be able to drive more out of it? I have to connect it first. So these are usually the first questions I ask a customer, right, when I'm talking to them. And it's funny that the one on the top left seems so simple, but nobody ever gets it. I had a customer who I sort of joke. I'm like, so if you get it wrong, I'll buy you lunch. And it's sort of a trap, right? I'm always going to buy them lunch anyways. But on average, for what I see, right, from an IT perspective, whatever number of employees they have either 4 to 5 times as many devices on their network. So if you have 5,000 employees, you're probably pushing 20,000 devices in a traditional IT shop. You move that to an operating technology environment, that could be closer to 30, 35,000 devices, depending on how automated it is. You get into the healthcare space, 5,000 employees is about 50,000 devices, right? So you go into any medical center, right? You walk into the room, there are workstations, there's infusion pumps, there's all sorts of machines, and what you don't realize, they're all wireless. I spoke to a hospitality company not too long ago. They have 4,500 rooms. Each room has 7 connected devices. Anything from controlling the shades, controlling the TV, controlling the temperature, right? They're all connected devices. If anyone gets in there, right, their ability to disrupt just the experience inside of the room is exceptional, right? So these are the things that, again, why did they do it? User experience, right? Why did they do it? It reduced the cost of having to heat their buildings, cool their buildings. The downside to it, it's now connected, right? And they ultimately have to protect it. And so one of the things we start to talk about is understanding all of these questions. It's difficult today. Could you get all these answers? Absolutely. You'll disappear for a month or so, and you'll come back and give me those answers. And oh, by the way, in that 1 month time, think of how many devices dropped off the network, joined the network, right? Changed the versions of software, changed versions of firmware. It's a never-ending cycle at that stage, right? So how do I automate this effort so that, again, I have that information in real time? Because guess what? Today is the next 0 day, right? And I need to be able to look into my environment and understand, hey, what is my exposure? Whether I have to report it to the board, I have to report it to the CEO, the CIO, whoever it may be, right? I need to be able to have that information at my fingertips. So here's how we sort of answer for these pieces, right? So again, discovering of all assets. It doesn't matter where it is, what it does, right? Whether it's wireless or wired, managed or unmanaged, how do I find that in a way that is efficient, but it's also safe, right? The quickest way to drop an OT environment, go run an Nmap. There's a lot of machines that were designed in the late 90s and early 2000s that do not like having network traffic thrown at them randomly. Once I understand that, right, how do I lay the context over as to what those devices are? Again, do I want a infusion pump talking to Eastern Europe? The answer is probably not, right? But I need to know that. If I don't know it, I can't stop it, right? So how do I make sure that we're able to understand that? And so as I start to pull in all the make, the model, the operating system, it allows me to layer over all of the vulnerability information associated with it. Listen, this is a risk-based equation, right? I'm not going to be able to fix all the risks in my environment. I have to make a determination as to what am I going to try and fix, and how do I do it in an economical fashion, right? Some of these big OT environments that I see, riddled with vulnerabilities. And the answer is, that's a $20 to $50 million project to put new technology in. So we're going to live with it, and we're going to put controls around it. So once I've discovered it, right, again, getting back to those risks and those gaps, but then ultimately use that information to drive automated actions, right? There's so many things that we can do to prevent it, right? Some of the more recent hacks that you're hearing about today, they're the result of flat networks. You land in one spot in their network and you have access to everything, right? And we're seeing it, right? Entire industries that were crippled for a week at a time, unable to process any business because they shut their systems down. In fact, one of them went and pulled the internet cord out of the wall, their connection, right, out of the internet to take their entire facility offline. Didn't help them, right? They still got ransomware, but that was ultimately their response at that point in time. So whether it's over the wire, it's over the air, a third party, right? I need to understand it, and I need to be able to go and get it. So again, our approach, it is agentless, it is passive, right? So again, we're not going to interrogate any devices. We're going to watch the data over, and we're going to integrate with your common tools, right? Ultimately, when I talk to C-level executives, the first thing I say to them is, hey, when you walk in tomorrow, if I gave you this data, what decisions are you going to make that are better than you had yesterday? Because ultimately, that's what it is. We're mining the data from your environment so that you can make better decisions more effectively and more efficiently and more confidently. And so I'll finish off here about time. Again, integrations into the majority of your common vendors, right? If you have any questions, I'm here for a little bit. Our booth is just behind us. I appreciate your time today. Thank you.